Welcome to 2nd edition Wargaming. I'm Rob, and in this video we're going to cover how the Ork Psychics work in the 2nd edition Psychic phase. Of all the armies in 2nd edition 40k that have specialist rules for the Psychic phase, Tyranids and Chaos being examples, the Orks have the most amount of special rules pertaining to the warp flux and the amount of powers they can use. Now the fluff explains this with the fact that Orks don't draw the power directly from the warp, they gain it from the power of the Waagh, from the Orks around them. So the more Orks, the more chance there is of absorbing that power. With regards to army list, you've got two types of Ork Psychic, the weirdboy, who's basically level 2 Psychic, and the weirdboy warphead, who's a level 4 Psychic. Now, on the battlefield, really the only major difference is that the weirdboy gets 2 minders, and these are Ork boys that kind of shuffle him around and get him where they need him to be, almost like an artillery piece. And the weirdboy warphead has 4 minders, so 2 and 4 minders. Now, should the weirdboy's minders be killed for whatever reason, the weirdboy will head for the nearest board edge to escape the battle because he's literally had enough. Whereas the weirdboy warphead will head towards the largest group of Orks so he can absorb as much power as possible. So that's the main difference between them. The other being that mad boys affect the weirdboy warphead with regards to absorbing more power. So if when we go into that a little bit later. But on the other side is mad boys can actually use the weirdboy warphead for leadership tests, whereas they can't use any other character or any other sort of effect or banner or anything like that can give them a leadership boost. Only weirdboy warpheads. Okay, so you've got one or the other, your weirdboy or your weirdboy warphead. And it's time for the Psychic phase. So you roll for the warp flux, and the cards are dealt between the two sides, the Ork player and whoever your opponent is. Now, if you're not sure how 2nd edition Psychic phase works, then I've done a video on that gives you a quick broad view of how the Psychic phase works. So the cards have been dealt. Now the Ork will check for additional warp cards from the power of the Waagh. So how that works is he has a 12-inch radius around him, and depending on what's inside that 12-inch radius will depend on how many additional warp cards you get. So I think it's something like if there's any number of Gretchen, it's one additional warp card. If it's up to 5 Orks, it's 2 additional warp cards. Now these aren't accumulative, you have to fit into a category, you fit into one of those categories. If there's up to 10 Orks, it's 3 warp cards. Over 10 or any number of mad boys, that's 4 warp cards, additional 4 warp cards on top of what you've been dealt. Now, if a weirdboy or a weirdboy warphead draws 4 warp cards from the power of the Waagh, he then gets an additional card anyway, just because. So that's 5. And there's only one other sort of modifying factor, and that's any hand-to-hand combat anywhere on the board doesn't allow, I think you have to draw an additional 2 warp cards. So, in the perfect storm, you could draw an additional 7 warp cards to the ones you've already been dealt from the warp flux. Now, it doesn't stop there. If the weirdboy or the weirdboy warphead have been subject to the Waagh, this additional power, then there's a chance that something could go wrong. And how you resolve that is you roll a d6 and you add your mastery level. Now, if that number is greater than the amount of cards you've absorbed from the Waagh, then you're okay. If the number is less than the amount of additional cards you've had from the Waagh, then something's gone wrong and you have to roll on the the Ed Bangers table. And on the Ed Bangers table, certain things can happen. It's a d6 roll. On a 1, you may discard just one additional warp card from your hand of your choice, but on a 6 the weird boy's head would explode and you've basically lost that unit. It can be a dangerous gamble. Obviously if you're a weird boy that's only level 2, you're only adding 2 to that d6 roll, so there's a better chance that he's going to survive. Of course, a weird boy warphead being level 4, there's a much greater chance of you failing. Now there is a war gear card you can take called the Weird Boy's Staff, and this literally allows you to re-roll when seeing if you need to roll on the Headbangers table. So that's a handy piece of war gear to have to give you a chance. Obviously it sounds fun, a little bit mental, what's the positives of having this? Well, it's actually quite powerful for the Ork player. In the warp deck, you have a lot of force cards and they allow you to use powers, but there's also a lot of special warp cards: retaining hands, reflection, destroy, demonic attack, energy drain, all these additional cards. Now, as an Ork player, you can use any cards that you've been dealt as force cards, so all of them can be used to cast powers, whereas other players, if you haven't got the force cards, you can't cast it. So that's a real bonus to that, meaning that a Weird Boy Warphead with a bit of a Waagh bonus will probably be able to get off all of his powers in a psychic phase. And the Ork psychic powers are very brute force orientated, as you would expect, and can be quite devastating to units. So it can really sort of turn the tide during a game. So it's a bit of a gamble and worth it most of the time. The only other additional bonus is one of the special warp cards called Demonic Attack, and this is a card that when your opponent goes to play a psychic power, you can say they've basically attracted the attention of a warp entity of some description, and it negates the power they're trying to cast, and it can also drag them into the warp, so to take them off the battlefield, remove them from the game. With an Ork Weird Boy or Weird Boy Warphead, this card will only affect them on the roll of a 6 on a d6, so you've got to get the 6 first, and then you go through the mechanism of the card, go through the instructions on the card. So not too bad. It can make for a lot of fun, but it can also get your Weird Boy Warphead destroyed in the first turn, and then you've got to struggle through the rest of the game without Psyker. But as I said, on the other side is you may get a lot of psychic powers off. You can cause a lot of destruction in the psychic phase if you can keep control of it. The way to play it is to basically keep most of your Orks away from the Weird Boy, keep him out of the way, and then you kind of roll him in when you need him, and bring the Orks into that 12-inch area and supply them with the additional force cards or warp cards when you need them. The other tactic is to have a very small squad of mad boys, because any number of mad boys count as a level 4 on the Waagh table. So that would be 5 cards straight away, just for having a very small group of mad boys come inside the 12 inches of the Weird Boy or the Weird Boy Warphead. So that's one tactic you can use. Okay, so what we'll do now is we'll just go for a sort of overhead view, and we'll run through how a psychic phase would work for an Ork player. Okay, so let's try and go through the Ork Psychic special rules. We're going to need an enemy Psyker. Let's go for this Space Marine Librarian for the opposing player's Psychic. And let's go for this Goth Rocker as the Weird Boy Warphead, as I don't actually have a model of a Weird Boy Warphead from that era. Now, he's going to have his Minders. Now, as a Weird Boy, he would have had 2, but a Weird Boy Warphead has 4. And they have to be in base contact for you to be able to control him as you want. We need the warp deck. 2 dice, 1 per Psyker is recommended to generate the warp flux. Powers. Let's go for the Librarian deck. 4 randomly selected. There you are. And the Ork player. Right, okay, so let's say the players are happy with those. We don't need to look at those at the moment. We're playing through the first turn, and it comes to the psychic phase. Let's say it's the Orks player's turn. He'll roll the dice for the warp flux. 7. He'll get first because it's his turn. Okay, 7 in total. Now, let's generate for the Waagh. Let's just say, for instance, there's up to just under, say, 9 boys within 12 inches of the Weird Boy Warphead. So that's going to be 3 on the Waagh table. Additional 3. Now, because he's drawn power from the Waagh, if there was no one within 12 inches of him, he wouldn't have had to draw that Waagh power. But because there is, he's drawn 3. So now he has to roll to see if he can control it. Now, that's a D6 plus his mastery level. His mastery level's 4. So he's only drawn 3. He's a level 4. Even if we roll a 1, we're going to get over 3. So it's not going to be a risk to him this turn. Let's see what he's got. Okay, so he's got 4 force cards and 3 special warp cards. So now, being an Ork player, the bonus is that he can use all of these as if they're force cards. So we look at his powers. He's got some pretty powerful ones there. Look, 2 force 3. So he can do those now. He's got enough cards to cast the 2 most powerful abilities. So let's say he goes for the crunch for his turn. That's 3 force cards on the discard. Put the rest of these in his hand. Now let's see what the Space Marine Librarian is going to do quickly. Well, he's got a nullify, so of course he's going to try and nullify that. It's a fail. So that's discarded and the power goes ahead. Now we're going to go to the Space Marine player. He's only got 1 force 1 ability and he's only got 1 force card here. So he's going to use that force card to cast that ability. And he's got a nullify left in his hand. Now, obviously, Ork player's got more than enough cards to take care of that. So he's going to use a nullify to try and stop that power taking place. And it's a failure again. So that power takes place. Back to the Ork player. Now, he's only got 1 force card, but as we stated, he can use these 2 as force cards. That allows him to do another really powerful ability, Death Wave. Gets rid of all those cards on the discard. Space Marine Librarian's got a nullify. He's going to give it a go. And it's a failure again. So that power goes ahead. Okay, let's fast forward. End of the psychic phase. Powers return to hand. Let's just say that's been nullified or an energy drain's been played at some previous turn. That's gone. So we're a couple of turns on now. All sorts is happening on the battlefield. There's boys everywhere. Mad boys, orcs, Gretchen, you name it. All within proximity of the weird boy. So that's going to affect his Waagh roll. So we're going to roll for flux, and it's the Ork player's turn. So that's 9. That's high already. That's pretty good. Okay, and now we're going to generate the Waagh. So let's just say there's over 10 Ork boys within 12 inches of him, or mad boys, and there's also hand-to-hand combat somewhere on the table. So that's a hell of a lot of cards. Let's have a look. So for the over 10 Ork boys, it is 4. Plus, if you draw 4 for whatever reason, you get an additional card. So that's 5. Plus, there's hand-to-hand combat. That's an additional 2. So now it's looking good for the Weird Boy Warphead. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cards. Now the problem with this is he has to again roll to control it. So he needs 8 or more of his mastery plus a d6. So 4 plus whatever I roll, and he wants 8. Otherwise, he's going to have to roll on the Headbangers chart because he literally cannot handle the amount of power. Oh dear. So 4, 5, 6. That's a failure. Now, if he had passed that, he could have used all these cards, and let's face it, with that amount of psychic cards, he's probably getting through every ability he has. So that's going to be a pretty good psychic phase. Or if he had the Weird Boy staff, it allows him to re-roll that. So there's a chance that, although he failed that there, he can re-roll that and maybe pass and not go on the Headbangers chart. But let's just say he hasn't got that. We're going to roll on the chart, see what the effect is. 1. Headbang. The Weird Boy's head explodes. Obviously, this is an exceptionally fatal experience, so remove the Weird Boy as a casualty. The heads of any models within D6 of the Weird Boy will also explode unless they can roll equal to or under their toughness on a D6. Head explosions kill their victims regardless of armor saves and wounds. So, as you can see, building up the Waagh, getting these warp cards can be extremely effective in the psychic phase. It can really sort of turn the tide of a battle or really sort of decimate the enemy. But the flip side is your head can explode. So I'll leave you with that. Okay, so that's the Ork special rules within the Psychic phase. Now, when the Psychic supplement came out for 2nd edition, Dark Millennium, there were 3 templates in the box set that were specifically for Ork powers. And as a little bonus, I thought it would be fun just to see how those 3 powers, those 3 templates, would have worked on the battlefield. So what we'll do now is we'll go to a sort of battlefield overview, and I'll try and carry out those powers against some enemies as if it was in a game. Okay, so let's go through the Ork Psychic powers as they would appear on the battlefield. Now, unfortunately, I did lie to you, and I thought there were 3 Ork templates in the Dark Millennium set. Unfortunately, there's only 2, but don't worry, they're pretty cracking powers. It shouldn't lessen the experience. So let's go for Deathwave first. Now, let's uses 3 force cards. So let's put them down there. The Ork player uses those. Let's have a look at the card there. So Force 3 and 4d6. We'll cover that in a minute. So a glowing wave of psychic power bursts from the weird boy's eyes. Place the death wave template so its center touches the weird boy and then move it 4d6 in a straight line away from him. Any models covered by the template as it moves suffer a hit. Models partially covered are hit on a 4, 5 or 6 on a d6. Roll a d6 for any models that are hit. If the roll equals or beats their toughness, they are killed regardless of armor saving throws and how many wounds they have. It doesn't affect vehicles, but it does affect crew on a 5 or 6 in the same way. The death wave will pass through any target even if it causes no damage. Its progress is not blocked by models, scenery or buildings, as the psychic energy automatically passes right through them. The death wave continues to move 4d6 in the same direction at the start of each subsequent psychic phase. The wave remains in play until it is nullified or until it eventually leaves the battlefield. Okay, so there you go. Let's just say the opposing player can't nullify or fails. We place the Death Wave template there, aim it at the Ultramarines. Let's get our 4 dice. Lovely. 14. That should do the job. Okay, so let's say these 2 were partial because they weren't fully covered, but those were. So let's give those 2 a 4+ and they're hit. So no, they're fine. So it's just those 3 in the centre. It was equal or over their toughness. Let's just check that. If the roll equals or beats their toughness. So a Space Marine is toughness 4 in 2nd edition. So we got 3 dice to roll. 4+ the Ork player wants. Lovely, 2. So that's 2 dead, no armor save. Those boys are gone. Okay, now this, as it states, this will continue at the beginning of the next psychic phase. If it's not nullified or the Ork player doesn't nullify, sort of like collapse the power, get rid of the power, there you are. That would just carry on up the board. And of course, it's not obscured by terrain. So if you've got someone hiding in cover or anything like that, you want it to sort of go through a wood. Happy days, it will travel through those woods, killing any models that are in them, or hopefully. So we got this. Let's go on to the second power. Again, this is the crunch. The crunch, there you go. Force 3, as it states there. Range 24, so we're definitely within 24 inches of the Space Marines. Let's just say no nullifier or anything like that. Now, this is the crunch template. I keep saying the crunch template. Quite comically, it's on both sides. It says that you can use it as the left or right foot of Gork. It might be a little bit blasphemous, but you could say maybe Gork Mork. I'm not sure how you feel about that. I'll leave that to you guys to decide. We're in 24 inches. We've cast it. It's not a problem. Who can we get? let's have a look. Well, you'd try and position that to get those, I would say, and you're going to get 2 complete and 1 on a 4+. So let's give that 4+. No, so he's safe, just out of it. The other 2, let's see what happens. The weird boy's fevered brain conjures up a huge ectoplasmic vision, and the mighty foot of Gork himself stomps down to squish the enemy into spalchy pancakes. Use the special template to represent the area covered by the foot by placing it over the desired target. Any models under the template are automatically hit unless they can roll under their initiative rating on a d6 to get out of the way. Any models which fail to dodge suffer a strength 10 hit. Now, in 2nd edition, if a minus armor modifier isn't given, there's a chart, and I'm pretty sure strength 10 would equal like -6 or -7 armor modifier. So the Space Marine powered armor wouldn't give a save in this instance. So initiative checks, they have to roll under their initiative. So it's not equal and under, that's under. So for these 2 Space Marines, their initiative 4, they need to get a 1 to 3. One of them's passed, one of them's failed. So that's a strength 10, that's going to be 2+ to wound. And no armor save, gone. Okay, so there you go. Obviously, you know, you've got break test rules and all that other stuff. But break test in 2nd would have come in immediately as they took 25% casualties, so it would have been the first 2. But there we are. I hope that was a clear enough demonstration of the 2 template powers. So I hope you enjoyed that video covering the Ork special rules. Little bonus of the psychic powers there. I thought that would be a bit of fun. If you're ever watching a battle report on this channel and you're not sure what's going on, then obviously you can just flick to these videos and it'll clue you up on how the sort of rules work in those specific areas. If there's any other areas of the psychic phase or of the 2nd edition rules in general you want me to cover, then please just put it in the comments below and I'll be glad to try and do those. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.